Welcome to Rock Solid, the Round Rock Business Leaders Podcast. Join your host, Bryan Eisenberg, as he explores the journeys of entrepreneurs and companies across Round Rock, Texas. From startups and nonprofits to large organizations, each guest shares their passion for doing business in this thriving community. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody. It's Bryan Eisenberg, and I'm here with YJ Lin. YJ, it's a pleasure to have you. I just want to first start off with congratulating you. I just heard you won on Volunteer of the Year for the Asian
Austin Asian Chamber.
Asian Chamber. So tell me a little bit about that and your work with that chamber.
Honestly, it was a little bit unexpected, but I'm very honored and grateful that they decided to honor me in that way. And I've just wanted to support the community. It wasn't, that I was particularly drawn to any particular community, but when I moved here 7 years ago, I was like, hey, the best way to get to know people, get to know my customers, get to know the people who I'm living next to is just being present. And if there's an opportunity to serve, I definitely wanted to serve. And I think 3 years ago is when I really started being more engaged with the chamber. In fact, it was a chamber that was actually supporting a lot of initiatives that my team and some of the work that I was doing. And I'm actually more grateful for them that they were so supportive and collaborative. Every time Dell was hosting an event, they're like, YJ, we'll promote it for you. And particularly 3 years ago there was a lot of layoffs in tech. And one of the things that we realized is that some of these employee resource groups, or we call them ERGs, or some companies call it BRGs, but a lot of the ERGs were losing a lot of budget, or their budgets were getting cut. They were being reallocated to different parts of the business, and a lot of people were a little bit worried about their own positions or what does it mean to be involved with the ERGs, because they're typically made up of all volunteers. And maybe it was because I was already doing this with the startups ecosystem, not only here in Austin, but in other cities. I reached out to some of the ERG leads at other companies or other corporations, and we have a lot in Austin.
Yeah.
And I just sent them a note and said, like, hey, I don't care how much money you have, but what would it look like if we just combine efforts and bring in, our members together? What could that happen? One of the first people who I reached out to and we collaborated on was this guy in National Instruments, now Emerson combined.
Mm-hmm.
And then we onboarded Oracle, and then I sent a note to Indeed, and at that time, Indeed was like, what is this random Zoom call? I didn't commit to anything. This is right after COVID. And I was like, guys, like I know you didn't commit, just entertain me for a little bit. And the first year, and this was like 3 years ago during May, and within 2 months, we were able to host an event with all the Austin Asian professionals in these companies. And we had probably around 6 corp companies, and we had like 200 people register. Last year, we had 12 corporations, over a dozen nonprofits, including the Austin Police Department, partnering up with the Austin Asian Resource Center, which I've been told is the only publicly funded resource center for Asian Americans here in Austin. And it was a collaboration, and we had over 600 people register. And that was a phenomenal event, and goes to show the collaboration that we have in our city. And we're scaling it. We're kind of passing off to new leaders to help manage it and to build it sustainably. And honestly, my mission has always been I love that we have this opportunity, this method or this example of what we can do together. How do we take this playbook, or how do we create these playbooks and inspire other cities? How do we inspire other industries? And I'm grateful for Dell, because that's really how I manage my business with Dell.
Yeah.
Like when I go to visit different startups or different cities, I was like, I know that it's easier to work with a city when the community leaders are working together as well. And all that to say, it's, Round Rock makes it really easy to do all that. So all to say, I didn't do this alone. The recognition is really just a strong affirmation for me that, as long as you're surrounded with the right people who have the similar desires, really the recognition is guys, I'm honored, but it's really a lot of people that I've worked with to be able to make it happen. And really a lot of credit went to the Austin Asian Chamber for really affirming and really supporting these initiatives.
I definitely want to go back into this community building part because I think it's such a central focus for you. But let's rewind a little bit because obviously you work at Dell and the Dell Startups. You're the senior program manager there for Dell Startups, and I want to explore what that is. But Dell has played such a central role in the growth of Round Rock, right, and of the community. And I know obviously you're also involved in the Round Rock Chamber. What do you think the startup community for Round Rock and the surrounding area, all of Williamson County as well, where do you see that trajectory happening with the community and what's going on right now?
Well, I've had the privilege of being able to visit a lot of different cities in not only the US and Canada. I've had the opportunity to see how different ecosystems manage their community of founders, investors, how they are able or not able to incorporate academia in a lot of these conversations. What I love about the Austin and the surrounding Round Rock ecosystem is that I think we're really self-reflective or self-aware of some of our strengths and talents. I think there has been a very long history of certain things and stories, such as a lot of these corporations coming in. There's a lot of resources that are available. There are some very strong community leaders that have certain niches and focus. I think the trajectory that Austin's going is just going to be more of an emphasis of how do we really tactically leverage these resources in a more collaborative manner. I mean, I think in the past, I believe 2-3 years, we have a lot of new initiatives. The Round Rock Chamber doubled down on their entrepreneurship initiative. We started the citywide pitch competition I think 3 years ago, and every single year we add something new and it grows bigger. And a lot of great effort done by Jordan and Adriana, and really the whole Entrepreneurship Council. And so it's really exciting for me to see Austin kind of pick up the space. I think for a while we were lagging a little bit, but due in part through COVID and certain people trying to figure out, there's, how do we able to collaborate more efficiently on resources? And I think seeing a lot more new, fresh ideas and people moving in, trying to see that there's certain industries such as fintech, medical, or even in gaming development that they're like, hey, YJ, I don't really see, these communities. But I was like, well, if you don't see a community, maybe they don't exist. So, instead of trying to figure out if they exist, let's just start something. And so I see a lot of those conversations, and maybe part of it is because we're getting some of the ideas and inspirations from Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio of hey, Dallas has certain things that they're doing really well. How do we bring it to the people who actually live here too?
Yeah.
So
Rock Solid is produced and recorded at Round Rock Studio. Located right here in Round Rock, our state-of-the-art studio is built for podcasters and creatives alike. We offer multiple professionally designed podcast sets, top-notch recording gear, and a full photography studio ready for any project. Whether you're launching a new podcast or upgrading your existing one, we can help with multi-camera recording, editing, and everything you need for success. Record with us at Round Rock Studio, your local podcasting partner.
Dell has had a big commitment towards startups, especially in the area, right? They have this special division that's working with communities, like you said, all across the country and as well as Canada. I want you to explain a little bit about what that team does and what it offers for entrepreneurs and startups, but also the commitment of Dell leadership, right, and of what some of them are bringing to the table.
Yeah, I think this program started around 6 years ago, and it started as one of our what we call the alternate routes to market, and it's another way for us to engage certain channels within small business. And we have back then one of our strongest teams were our associations, so working with associations such as National Association of Realtors, IEEE, there's hundreds of small business associations. And so one of the things that were brought up internally was what would it look like if we, supported entrepreneurs? Of course, starting here in Texas. Yep. And as Michael Dell would say, one of the largest startups. I mean, we have a brand that was built not by me, obviously, in the past 40 years. And how do we take all the resources, all the solutions that we have. Dell is known as an end-to-end solutions provider. So anything from peripherals all the way to servers to all these different enterprise solutions we integrate
Custom
with a lot of
OS.
people.
Yeah.
And so the same philosophy that we have when it came to products and serving our customers, how do we do that with the startups? And one of the things that we were really conscious of is, whenever a big corporation goes into this really ragtag team of like startup ecosystems, one of the biggest questions is like, why are you here? It's a interesting conversation to have, and I'm grateful for it because I may not necessarily have to explain who I am or what I do.
Yep.
But why we are here is simple. It's because we know that you're in a position where you believe in something that is not currently solved by anyone else, and you're willing to risk a lot of things, sacrifice a lot of things to make it happen. And what would it look like to support those entrepreneurs and founders who really have this strong vision and passion to make it happen? And so it is a little bit of a long-term play where, we have over 600 reps here in the US, half of which is in the Round Rock campus. And we're constantly, bringing in more people to help support our small business owners and startups. And really our key value prop and our biggest value that we have to the startups and founders is that we wanted to make sure that you had a point of contact to talk to. So if any of these small business owners or startups or entrepreneurs, you're wearing multiple hats, let's make sure IT doesn't have to be one of them. We'll offer you, tech specs or consultations or recommendations of like what you should be looking for. What does all these, processing power or memory storage, what does that look like? And at the end of the day, yes, I'm going to do everything we can to save you money. What is the hope? Why are we doing this? Is because, once you get funded, once you start going back, I hope you think of the people who first helped you too.
Well, it's even more than that. I heard you talk about this before as well. A lot of great startups and entrepreneurs, when they first get their first hires, they get a lot of generalists, right?
Yeah.
Full stack developers and stuff like that. And by collaborating with something like Dell, they can tap into a lot deeper expertise in certain areas. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, I'm smiling because I share this because I used to get in trouble at Dell sometimes. And the main reason why is because as someone who came from, like, me and my little brother have our own business. We have a small e-commerce shop. We have like 7 3D printers in my garage, and we print a lot of board game pieces. Yep. And this is kind of where, I have this like startup and entrepreneurship hat, and then I'm wearing this corporate hat. And I remember I used to get in trouble because in corporate, I may not necessarily ask for certain permissions to do things. I was like, hey, I think this is a good business idea. I'm just going to execute it. I think let's just get this done as soon as possible, as fast as possible. Sometimes without consideration over brand guidelines, marketing, things that...
Ask for forgiveness.
Ask for forgiveness, And the reason why that's not a good idea in corporate, I mean, it could get you so far, but it's because whether I like it or not, there's 100,000 people, if not more, of people that I'm accountable for. I could say something that might not necessarily be ideal or go to go towards to what Dell's goals are. Whereas in my own business, if I fail, I'll just start over.
Yep.
Right?
You get to call all the shots.
I get to call all the shots. Now, the problem was I was taking my corporate mindset in my own business. Why does the e-commerce company need to create Power BI or a heat map of all their customers? No, just sell product.
Yeah.
Right. I don't need to overanalyze my customers or their customer journey. I just need to reiterate, make it faster. And then in corporate, I was maybe moving too fast, and so I needed to learn to slow down a little bit, be more deliberate and thoughtful. But it made me think of like, okay, knowing which hat you're wearing and the context that it serves. I mean, Dell started as a small company at one point. And what was really fascinating about this experience, and especially for a lot of my peers who are working startup initiatives in corporate, and they'll understand this too, is that understanding the harmony and balance and understanding how we can support each other. What startups learn from corporate is that we have people with decades of experience learning go-to-market strategy, financial projections, specifically on how do we deliver a good customer service. And so people who have specialized skills, and what startups can learn is that, look, as an entrepreneur, you start as a generalist, you're developing product. How do we take some of the best practices that people who've been doing it for decades only on one specific industry? Like, how can we learn from that? And then what do corporate can learn? I mean, as a corporation, and I'm not saying this for everyone or particularly Dell, generally they hire people who are specialized in certain skills because that's what we want to do. And sometimes we forget, or because of how specialized we are, we don't know how different teams integrate with each other, right? As an entrepreneur, you have to be close to the market. You have to be very reactive, and you have to be willing to work with different teams and understand different parts of the business. And so, what corporations, especially our corporate innovation teams, is like, how do you work with entrepreneurs who are constantly innovating and testing it? They are the people that are, taking the risk of trying to test if the market will adapt. And where corporate can support with the entrepreneurs is, we get to learn from that experience. And if anything, helps like drive our passion for the reasons why we do the things that we do.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate everything you do, and like you said, you get to see a lot of communities, and you're also involved in the Entrepreneur Council with the Round Rock Chamber. So you're obviously very community driven. What is your passion behind supporting communities, and for business owners and entrepreneur, why this hat that you wear about this community driven is such an important thing for them to understand as well?
Honestly, it was a lot of self-reflection. I spent a lot of my life trying to think about what I wanted to do. And I was always so interested in other people's stories. And we talked a little bit about this, is because I just thought everyone else was more interesting than I was. Like,
okay,
I remember telling a friend that, hey, I'm an open book. And I truly am. Like, if you have any questions, nothing to hide. And I had a friend one time told me, like, well, I think you're only an open book because you have nothing to read. I started laughing, but all that said, I think my book, if I was to reflect on it, was more of a collection of other people's stories and the collaborations that we were able to have with each other. And one of my favorite things that I learned over time and through a lot of mentorship and reflections was that really what fulfills me was not just understanding other people's stories, but understanding where all these stories were going towards. And how do we empower people to realize that, like, as a community leader and, many community leaders, we're also passionate about certain problems that members have. But even as a community, we weren't necessarily all great at everything. And what does it mean to build a strong ecosystem is learning how all these communities within this ecosystem could play well with each other. Like, how do we celebrate the gifts and talents, and how do we lean into each other for the things that we struggle with or our blind spots? My favorite conversations are sometimes when people tell me, like, YJ, I don't think that's right. Like, here's another perspective. It's like, hey, I actually don't think that we should limit ourselves to these things. And those are sometimes my most favorite conversations, because they would, these perspectives would bring in something that, I may have not considered. And all to say that I discovered that my passion was really to be the best coach or cheerleader for other community leaders to figure out how do we do things in a way that is sustainable and generates business impact. And I explained this further by saying, like, how do I help corporations see that a lot of these community efforts aren't just cost centers? They can drive revenue, they can drive product, they can drive marketing. How do I help nonprofits understand how to create more sustainable programs so that social workers don't have to worry about their own families while they're serving, something that a lot of people may not necessarily have the empathy or bandwidth to do it. And all these social workers who love their jobs and want to be like to be present with the people that desperately need help. How do we make sure that those programs are sustainable? And then even religious organizations, how do we make sure we help people who are in religious organizations don't burn out? I see oftentimes a lot of these faith-based organizations, you have these leaders who are so focused on outreach programs. And it's like, how do we make sure we pour back into them too? And so it's a really holistic conversation. And lastly, the family conversation. There's a lot of families out there, whether it's like generational stress or trauma, but then some families who have done a phenomenal job bridging like their grandparents' stories to their grandkids, conversations and the way that they perceive the world, and really how do we help people like reframe the generational conversation so that we know how we can like take what was great and make it even better, and really understand what we struggle with in the past, so that we don't use these stories necessarily to limit us, but to inspire us to make something better. And I love community because as I become more deeply involved with it, as I talk to a lot more entrepreneurs, it became more clear to me that this is a really important conversation so people will learn how to live more holistic lives.
I love that. As you were saying about the book thing, it triggered something in me because back in the days when I was a social worker, and I was telling you about this earlier, and I was telling you about a couple of my clients, and I had a boss, Fred, who was a former priest who became an alcoholic, got thrown out of the church, lived on the Bowery in New York City, went into social work and just changed his whole life and really tried impacting everybody. Just an amazing gentleman. And here I was, probably 20, 21 years old, and he'd keep asking me, he said, when are you going to write your book? When are you going to write your book? Meanwhile, all through high school and college, like if you asked me if I was ever going to write a book, I'd be like, yeah, you're insane. Like reading was not my thing either, right? It was kind of funny. And it's only in the last few years that I've really been reflective on what he meant by that, right? And I think, I wish he was still around so I could ask him, but I think he meant, where are you going to blaze your own path? And it's something I appreciate about you, especially because, here you are, you're blazing your own path in this corporate world of, Dell for Startups, but you also have your own e-commerce business, and you're writing your own chapters, you're writing your own story. What's next in this story?
Well, I hadn't told a lot of people this, but you know what? One of the things is, closed mouths don't get fed. I do strongly believe that your goal is to introduce you to your friends. And one of the things I really would love to do is to teach. Mm-hmm. I love to work with students. I love to also continue to work with professionals. And, right now in my life, I'm trying to look into what's the best route, whether that's pursuing a master's or a doctorate's program, or to really work with people who would love to research together on how do we continue to create these playbooks of how we can build communities. And I realized that you had to build communities in stages, and I realized that you need to be able to communicate and build strategy around what is your community doing to build business impact. All that being said, I'm very conscious, and I mentioned this to all my friends and professionals, is that every time I go down this rabbit hole of like, here's all the different building blocks of community building, guys, this is only like this, all this 100% science about building community is only 50% of what it means to build a community. Half the battle is just being present and understanding what people are dreaming about, what they're scared about, and just being present to understand that, like, some of the things that we want to build for our community, you can understand that just by being there with people and truly understanding people. And so I really want to figure out, how do we communicate this and package this for people to understand, like, how can we do this really intentionally? And I say intentionally because we're all part of a community. Like, we've been a part of community, whether we've had that
human nature.
Human nature. I mean, we grew up in a community, we was raised in a community.
We survived because of community.
Survive, whether they've been good or bad, whether we've had that feelings of belongingness or otherness. We've always known community, but how do we package it so that we can leverage our experiences, not only work and faith in our neighbors and our homes and even nonprofits? And I truly believe this is important, because if we're able to show people that community is really the answer, like building intentional communities, then we're going to just have better lives, overall. And so one of the things I really want to do is, like, how can I really share with people things that they already know, but how do we package it in a way that makes it simple for them so that they know that they're doing it? And that's really important for me. I've written this 13 times in my master's application. Is like, if I can empower 1 million people to help them prioritize community in a way that generates sustainability so that they don't have to worry about, if this is going to support me financially or socially or knowledge. Like that would be the journey that I want to be on.
So maybe I'll have to, every time I run into you, I'll be the one asking you, so where's your book? And then we can put it on that shelf. You never know.
Yeah.
I know you grew up in the Houston area, but now you live here in the Round Rock area. What's some of your favorite things about the Round Rock area?
I just love how accessible everyone is. And if people say that, they're not accessible, you're not at the communities. You're not showing up. I think like the Round Rock city has opened their arms pretty wide. Everyone's very personable. Everyone's easy to talk to. You can see that, the city is also investing into the education and public service. I mean, the new library is phenomenal.
Beautiful,
and
yeah.
I love Gita, shout out. It's who's the assistant director, I think, of the public library. And it's just how humble everyone is. I think that the humility, I think the willingness to collaborate this is a place where you can raise a family, but at the same time, we all want to support business owners. And that's something that I really appreciate about it. The Round Rock Chamber opens their doors to anyone. If you have an idea, if you really want to try something, reach out. Now, there's always a lot of things going on the back that, we might not necessarily know about why it might take things so, a long time, but I would say that our chamber runs faster than a lot of other chambers, and so I'm really grateful for that.
If you had to give a shout out to any particular business in town, who are you going to give a shout out to?
Well, I love this podcast studio. I mean, we were just visiting and be able to, there we go, just being able to like see arts and culture. In fact, like I'm so glad that this place exists, because in certain cities who have a big focus on arts and entertainment and just how do we promote these stories, I've seen that after COVID, a lot of startup programs in that city didn't feel the impact that other cities have, just because there is a big focus on storytelling. And I'm going to shout out Chicago because they do that really well.
Yep.
I'm going to shout out Atlanta because, they also did that really well. When after COVID, we visited some of these community leaders. They're like, yeah, we were actually pretty fine. Our startups were very resilient. And I want to attribute that to the arts and culture. I want to attribute that to the fact that they've done a really good job of sharing stories and packaging stories. And I love that Austin continues to support it. In fact, we should do more to double down on the stories that Austin has to share.
Let's shout out to all the storytellers out there.
100%.
YJ, if people wanted to get in touch with you, ask you any questions, where could they find you?
Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll share my email as well. And there's a lot of, honestly, if you're involved in a community, you'll probably see me running around. But LinkedIn's probably the best bet. I'm pretty active just through the direct messages. But I'm always available, especially if you're someone who is very involved in community and wants to understand how to make it better or be more intentional. I may not know the answers, but I love to collaborate. And on top of that, if you're interested in learning about how do we could leverage our strengths, as individuals or as members, or what is the right people that I should be recruiting, I'm also a licensed Gallup Strengths Finders coach. And so I've been helping individuals and teams in other companies to understand, how do we really take a step back and look at all the talents that we have to offer, and how do we use that to create success as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for being here.